Hello, and welcome to the HR for Non-HR Managers course. Thank you so much for joining us today. In today's fast-moving world, many managers and supervisors are expected to deal with some human resource issues. They may be asked to take part in developing job descriptions, sit in on interviews, or take responsibility for discipline. So this course will introduce you as a manager to human resource concepts. We will walk you through the hiring process, from performing a skills inventory to conducting the interview, discuss orientation, and cover some issues that arise after the hiring, such as diversity issues, compensation, and discipline. At the completion of this workshop, you will be expected to know and understand how to write job specifications and identify core competencies, methods of finding, selecting, and keeping the best people using behavioral description interviewing techniques, how to get employees off to a good start, how to deal with compensation and benefits, how to maintain healthy employee relations, how to make performance appraisals a cooperative process. So with that said, let's just jump straight in and go into our next lesson. I wish you a happy learning. Defining human resources. In HR role, you're in charge of everything that deals with making the human resources, people working for an organization, as productive as possible. That means make sure everything is running smoothly so that both employers and employees are satisfied and motivated. But what does that entail exactly? Human resource management requires a combination of emotional intelligence, assertiveness, and business savvy. You must balance the company's goals and bottom line with the well-being of its employees. This means that HR managers not only have to be able to deal with all sorts of different personalities in an organization, but also have a strong working knowledge of the business side of things. And now, let's look at necessary skills for any HR professional. Strong writing and communication skills. Basic knowledge of business skills, but really, the more the better. Knowledge of employment and labor laws. Strong interpersonal skills. Flexibility. High level of analytical and strategic thinking. Patience. Resilience. Remember, the responsibilities of an HR professional vary depending on the organization they work for. Smaller companies may have 1 or 2 representatives, whereas larger companies may have a large team with people specializing in different areas. Some of the different roles of a human resource manager are recruiting and hiring. For this role, it's important to have a strong understanding of the company. What are its goals? How is it changing or evolving? Then, you have to be able to identify the type of employee or contractor that will succeed in taking the organization where it needs to go. Those in charge of recruiting and hiring must be able to match character traits with companies' goals and be able to identify whether someone is going to be a cultural fit or not. They also have to be able to attract talent to the organization. Next is training and employee development. This is an important part of creating a successful business. It takes more than just hiring someone to ensure they'll be an asset to the company. The role of training and employee development is focused on making sure employees are as productive as possible. Next, organization development. Organization development is all about making sure the company as a whole is working together effectively. This involves working through changes occurring at a company, identifying issues in different departments, and figuring out ways to fix them, and assessing current business methods to see if they can be improved. This HR role requires the ability to analyze data while also having strong communication skills. You'll need to be able to assess a situation, figure out how it can be improved, and then translate that message to the workforce. Salary and benefits. A background in accounting doesn't hurt here. It's also important for an HR manager in this department to possess a working knowledge of local and state-level laws so that they're familiar with everything their employees are entitled to. And finally, dispute resolution. This role requires you to have a thorough knowledge of the law on both the employer's and employees' sides. The goal is to come to a compromise with as little cost as possible, legal costs or costs to workplace via disruptions like strikes. It's also important for a person in this role to be able to look into the future, to come up with preventative measures. Dispute resolution requires a large amount of emotional intelligence. The best possible outcome would be to give both parties what they want. In order to do this, you have to be able to put yourself into each of their shoes and find a solution that will appease both. Welcome back there. Today, we will look at forecasting. Human resource forecasts are attempts to predict an organization's future demand for employees. If you know your department is going to grow, you'll want to pay attention to these tools. Forecasting techniques range from the informal to the sophisticated. Even the most sophisticated methods are not perfectly accurate. Instead, they are best viewed as approximations. Perhaps the quickest forecasting technique is to project past trends. The two simplest methods are extrapolation and indexation. First, let's look at extrapolation. For this technique, you must first have data for the same time period that you're forecasting. Let's say we want to predict how much our company is going to grow over the next 4 years. We'll say our current year is year 4. Here, we can easily see a trend. Revenue grew by 50% in year 2, and employees stayed the same, while revenue and staff doubled in year 3. From year 3 to year 4, revenue tripled, but staff stayed the same. Let's use the same chart and fill in the known data for the current year, year 4. If we look at the first table of actual data, you can see that from year 1 to year 2, our revenue increased by 50%, but our employees stayed the same. If we presume that the same thing will happen in the next 4-year period, we can apply that formula to year 4 to come up with figures for year 5. If we continue applying the trend, we can extrapolate the remaining years. This shows us how our staff should develop if the past trends continue, and how the revenue stream should also flow. Of course, this isn't guaranteed to be accurate, but it may help you plan for the future. Next is indexation. Indexation matches employee growth with another factor, such as sales or revenue. Let's say that the Acme Widget Company indexes its employees by widgets sold. They know that they need 10 employees for every 100,000 widgets sold. So, if they forecast that they are going to sell 400,000 widgets next year, they know that they will need 40 employees. Then, human resources can look at that number and determine what hiring and recruitment processes need to be put into place. Welcome to our today lesson on understanding job analysis. To ensure job descriptions are as precise as possible, a job analysis should be performed. This will ensure that the job description accurately reflects the tasks that the job entails. But what is a job analysis? Well, a job consists of a group of tasks that must be performed if an organization is to meet its goals. A job may be held by only one person or by many people. A job analysis is the process of determining systematically the skills, knowledge, and duties required to perform jobs in an organization. It is performed by obtaining answers to 6 questions. What physical and mental tasks does the worker accomplish? When is the job to be completed? Where is the work to be accomplished? How do the workers do the job? Why is the job done? What qualifications are needed to perform the job? There are at least 3 different times when a job analysis should be performed. When new jobs are created. When jobs have changed because of new technology, methods, etc. When they have not been analyzed for a period of time and a new worker is required for the job. The information from a job analysis is used to identify competencies, prepare position descriptions, and develop job specifications. Research is very conclusive that managers who understand what a job involves do a much better job and have a much lower rate of hiring error than those who run in at the last minute and begin the interviewing process. An occasional job analysis can serve another very useful purpose. Sometimes we don't really stop long enough to take stock of a position, especially if it's a position that has been in place for a long period of time. Occasional job analyses will help you evaluate positions and any new tasks or requirements that have come into play. Hiring the right person the first time takes more than a gut feel. It takes planning and preparation, both of which begin with understanding the job and what it involves, understanding the technical skills the job requires, understanding the performance skills the job requires, describing those skills in objective behavioral terms. Remember, there are several ways of doing a job analysis. Direct observation, often used by a first-line supervisor or manager. Interviews, a step beyond observation, as there is an exchange of information. Combined observation and interview. This can make for a complicated process. Questionnaires. They can be customized to the job, and they are relatively inexpensive to do. And now, let's look at job analysis formats. There are many variations of the basic job analysis format that we just looked at. Here are a few of the most popular. Functional job analysis. As you might guess, this involves analyzing the functions of the job. The most recent version of FJA uses 7 scales to describe what workers do in jobs. Things, data, people, worker instructions, reasoning, math, language. Although there is a formal system involving weighing factors for each area, you can also develop your own informal functional job analysis by evaluating the criteria that apply to your employee. Next is Factor Evaluation System. In this system, points are assigned for various areas of the job, such as knowledge, supervisory controls, guidelines, complexity, scope and effect, personal work contacts, physical demands, work environment. This makes the job analysis a more uniform process and makes it easy to compare 2 positions that may appear very different. Critical incident technique. This system uses a more practical approach. Critical incidents for the position are identified, allowing the analyzer to identify skills and knowledge that would be needed to resolve that incident. And finally, Occupational Analysis Inventory, OAI. This system rates 5 job elements: information received, mental activities, work behavior, work goals, and work context. On a 4-part scale, part of job, extent, applicability, or a special scale designed for the element. You have done the job analysis in some form. Now, armed with that information, you can identify competencies, which are knowledge, skills, and abilities that will be required to do the job. Once we have identified those competencies, you can start writing the position profile or job description. Sometimes it helps to break them down into technical and performance skills. First, let's start with technical skills. These are skills that call upon specific technical knowledge or experience. Think about it. Can the individual do the job? How do you determine technical skills? Ask yourself these questions. What specific kinds of machines will the employee use? What specific kinds of computer hardware or software will they use? Is there a certain specific and prescribed way they must manipulate tools? What do you really need? You'll have to decide if previous experience in these technical skills is important, or if you will train the successful candidate. Though technical skills are often more easily learned than performance skills, many jobs demand that a person arrive with their technical skills already in place. Technical qualifications can be considered here. If candidates must have a driver's license, a degree in civil engineering, or a diploma from a recognized IT training program, these are not considered performance skills, and therefore fall under this category. Now, let's look at performance skills. These are the will factors. These are the tasks and responsibilities assigned to the position. They are closely tied to work habits that reflect the way a person gets a job done. They may relate to working with or managing other people, making decisions, following guidelines, or dealing with the public. A customer service supervisor, for example, might need to supervise 3 customer service representatives, apply established guidelines to specific customer inquiries, and solve work unit problems. These are all performance skills. At the same time, you may expect this employee to be skilled in using Word, have some knowledge of database management, including designing and maintaining a database, and know how to set up spreadsheets. These are considered technical skills. Before we go on to the job description, think about the work environment. When you understand the work environment, then you can find the fit that is required to make sure the person you have in that job is the right person for the job. We'll talk more about this later, but in today's world, fit isn't an instinct in your gut. Fit is identifying the culture in which the person works, and then looking for candidates who will fit with that culture. Here are competence factors you may want. Please have a look at this slide. Now it's your turn. Think of a position you need to fill in the near future. Write down the technical skills needed for this job. When you identify a competency, your job isn't done until you also define what you mean by that competency. The easiest way to do this is to think of someone you know who you would say has that competency. What does this person do to make you think he or she has that competency? That is your definition. Hi there, welcome back. Today we will talk about preparing a profile. People don't always like preparing position profiles. They feel they have just given their employee the perfect excuse to say, "That's not in my job description." On the other hand, we have organizations that take to position profiles or job descriptions with a vengeance. They have pages of descriptions, and the actual details are lost in mountains of words, so the employee still doesn't know what they're supposed to do. A job description is a written record of the responsibilities of a particular job. It indicates the qualifications for the job and outlines how that job relates to others in the company. Here are some things to include in your job description. Position title, salary or pay grade, department, to whom the position is accountable, hours required, environment, job purpose, summary of job, major KRAs, key results areas, and sample tasks to fulfill, not only the responsibilities, but the relative importance of these responsibilities, extent of authority, level of complexity of duties, amount of internal and external contact, amount of access to confidential information, amount of independent judgment required, amount of pressure involved in the job, type of machinery and equipment used, working conditions, terms of employment, Remember, even if your company has determined it is not going to have job descriptions, writing a job description will help you clarify what the position entails and its necessary qualifications. Often, job descriptions and job specifications get rolled into the same document, but job specifications include day-to-day duties, other duties. How is the position supervised? What other positions receive supervision from this position? What type of records must be kept? To what extent is this position involved in analysis and planning? What verbal, numerical, mechanical aptitudes are required? One of the biggest problems identified in the workplace right now, in this age of change, is the employee who doesn't know what his role is, doesn't know what he is to do, and doesn't know what others expect of him. Even if the position profile never gets into the employee's hands, it is a very good exercise for supervisors. Then, at least they know what they want their employees to do, and they can tell them in that first meeting after the hire. So, here are 3 important categories in a job description. Purpose, not what they do, but why they are there, the reason the job was created. Key responsibilities, what you are paying them to accomplish. Typical activities, those things they are expected to do in order to accomplish these responsibilities. Now it's your turn. I would like you to have a look at Resources file, which contains a sample description template, so then you can develop one for your company. Let's now evaluate all options. Now, and only now, are you ready to recruit candidates for a position? However, do you really need to hire a new person? Don't be too quick to post your ad. Maybe other options make more sense. Think about it. What are some of your options? If your organization has ascertained there is a genuine need, you may still have to convince them there is true value in taking time to fill this position properly. Do you have any idea of what it costs to hire a new employee? Sometimes, when we see all the people coming to the door looking for jobs, we think employees are like potatoes on a conveyor belt. Toss out the reject and select another one. But employee turnover costs money, usually a lot more than we realize. Costs include everything from the cost of running an ad to screening and interviewing the candidates to the time and money to train these new people. Some companies have identified costs ranging from 35% to as much as 100% of an employee's annual salary. But we can do a lot to minimize employee turnover by doing as much as we can to make sure we hire the right person in the first place. There are 3 important considerations when you are looking for candidates. Your methods must be timely yet cost-effective and promote positive employee relations. There are several options to consider. First one is file searches. Please have a look at this slide. Next, internal searches. And placement services. Referral programs. And finally, third-party recruiters. The point is, don't just rush to your nearest newspaper and put in an advertisement. There may be a better way of finding the people you want. Track your efforts so you will know for sure. Advertising guidelines. If you do think advertising is the way to go, don't just send off to the media what you sent off last time. Advertising guidelines should include information about company. Who are you? What do you do? Particularly for internal postings and for local newspapers, we forget to sell ourselves. Remember that employees and other members of the community will read this. An advertisement can help boost your company image. What position is being advertised? If you read employment ads enough, you'll see companies that forget to mention what the candidate would be doing if they were hired. What qualifications do they need? Sometimes we think the way to discourage a lot of resumes is to list miles of qualifications. That isn't so. All this will do is discourage the ones you really want to apply. Analyze the job. What technical and performance skills do you need? What would be nice to have? Hiring a receptionist who has a degree in secretarial sciences may mean you will be hiring for that position again in a few months. Responsibilities and challenges. Think about it. What will this person do? Is there challenge or a chance to grow? The best candidates will be looking for something more than a paycheck. Keep in mind, position is important. Don't overlook the classified ads. The right candidate for some positions would never think of looking in the business section for a position. Similarly, those who look on the business page for their next job may never look in the classified section. For example, when a fast food company was looking for part-time moms to work over the school lunch hour, they put their ad in the women's section. A stereotype? Maybe, but it worked. Position on the page. This is good fodder for an argument. However, most researchers agree that the right-hand page of any newspaper or magazine is seen slightly more often than an advertisement on the left. Graphics. Images should be clean and easy to read. Often a sans serif font for the heading and a serif font for the ad will make it look friendlier. Try not to rely on your newspaper to choose the graphics. They will choose the one they used for everybody else's ad, and yours will not stand out. Call to action. Remember to include information about applying right now. Use white space. Ads cost money, and we hate to waste space. But cramming too many words into an ad makes you look cheap, and is often so unattractive people don't read it. Using generous white space and words that have been carefully chosen to say what must be said is much more effective. So, here are 10 tests for advertising. Ask yourself, does the ad concentrate on the job? Does it sort out and emphasize important details? Does it highlight unique opportunities? Is the ad specific? Is the ad realistic? Does the ad avoid cliches? Does the ad speak to the reader? Does the look of the ad portray the company image, the position's importance to the company? Would a stranger understand the job opportunities? Does the ad have sell? Welcome back. Today, we will talk about conducting the interview. Employment interviews are very like appraisal interviews. Preparation is extremely important. Some items of preparation that you can consider are: before the interview, develop a question guide interview guide. Everyone who is conducting the interview should be familiar with the guide. Give yourself enough time between appointments. Have a room conducive to an informal interview. Think about it. What sort of room would set the stage for an interview? How should it be set up? Remember, the interviewer is the company. Before the interview, go to get the person. Shake hands. Show them where to put their coat. Tell them which chair is theirs. The interview format include: establish rapport. This is the warm and fuzzy part, but be careful what you say. Give a little bit of information about the company and a little bit about the position. Discussion about the job, technical aspects, performance aspects, and fit. Closing. Here, talk more about job and company. What happens next? Permission to check references. Conclude and shut up. We know that the structured interview, where every candidate has the opportunity to answer the same questions, is more objective and defensible. We recognize the validity of behavior-based questions because the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So, well-prepared critical incidents, stories of real events that ask for specific behaviors, identify performance behaviors, and have about an 85% accuracy rating. However, interviewing is not a science. As an HR, your job is to eliminate as many opportunities for error as possible. Know what the job entails. Think of the different interviews you have sat through on either side of the table. What were the things that went wrong? Have you ever left a job interview thinking you didn't want to work for a particular company? The truth is, the vast majority of hiring managers don't know what it takes to hire the right candidate. They have very little knowledge of proper hiring techniques. This lack of knowledge isn't beneficial to the manager, and it isn't beneficial to the candidate. A hiring manager may decide someone isn't the right person for the job simply because that manager didn't ask the right questions, asked ambiguous questions, or asked all the wrong questions. So, many perfect candidates for jobs walk out the door never to return, for no other reason than a recruiter's inexperience. So, there are 3 biggest problems out there. The recruiter doesn't know applicants' qualifications or specifics of the job. The recruiter makes a poor impression that gets transferred to the company. The recruiter has no plan in place for a structured interview. There are a few other factors we should be aware of as well. These are human factors that we all can fall victim to, but which we can usually control if we are aware of them. And we are talking about these now because while they are most prevalent in the interview itself, these tendencies rear their head long before the interview. We can see them as we rate the resumes themselves. Firstly, leniency or stringency. This is a tendency to rate candidates too harshly, so that none of them meet your exacting criteria, or being too easy on them, so that all of them pass with flying colors. Halo or horn effect. This tendency has been researched extensively. Here, attractive candidates are viewed more favorably than unattractive candidates. Tall candidates are seen as more competent than short candidates. For example, have you ever noticed how many presidents of the United States are tall, over 6 feet? Candidates who have family or friends we approve of may rate higher than those who have family or friends we don't approve of. Next is error of central tendency. This is our tendency to give average marks to most candidates. Have you ever watched figure skating competitions? You have seen many of the judges cluster their marks toward the center or average. Nobody wants to go out on a limb. Of course, you have also seen all the other tendencies as well from these judges. And finally, stereotyping. A male who applies for what is predominantly considered a female position has to be one whiz-bang to stand a chance. Similarly, a female would have to be twice as good as most males to get a job in a male-oriented position. For employers, interviewing has made the transition from being an art to being a science. If you read the HR journals, you keep seeing a variety of interviewing techniques: stress interviews, situational interviews, and behavioral interviews. Each technique has its own nuances, but they have all been developed with one goal in mind: to measure more accurately and reliably how a candidate will perform on the job if hired. Like scientists, interviewers are now expected to gather similar types of information on all the candidates they interview, information that can be measured, quantified, and more easily and accurately compared. Basics of behavioral interviewing. Since 1986, there has been a real move toward behavioral interviewing techniques, or behavioral descriptive techniques, based on our belief that the best indication of future behavior is past behavior. There are some real pluses to using behavioral type interviews. Reliable indicator of future performance. Candidates feel they have had a comprehensive interview. Not all candidates will feel like this. Those who have never heard of more current methods sometimes feel like they have been asked questions that were too personal. The goal of the interview process is to predict future job performance based on examples of previous specific behaviors, which illustrate the desired competencies through tactful probing. A behavioral interview is a structured interview that is created after a thorough analysis of the job skills needed for a successful job performance. The competencies are then selected that define the knowledge, skills, and abilities which must be assessed during the interview process. This paves the way to develop interview questions designed to identify the presence of these competencies. The interviewers are looking at behavior in situations similar to those that will be encountered in the new job. By relating a candidate's answers to specific past experiences, you'll develop much more reliable indicators of how the individual will most likely act in the future. Purpose of behavioral interviewing. Behavioral questions ensure spontaneity, since candidates can't prepare for them in advance. Hence, you're assured of more accurate answers in the selection process, and you're provided with specific ammunition to use later down the line in the reference checking process. The behavioral interviewing tools will ensure that the selection process is objective, consistent, and transparent, based on the competencies and proficiency level of the job, a good predictor of performance. Past behavior in specific situations will indicate more accurately a candidate's personal preferences, attitudes, and behaviors. A person can have the skills and knowledge to do the job, but may not have the inclination to do it. The behavior-based interview incorporates structured questions on the candidate's past behavior in situations similar to those that will be encountered in the new position. It goes beyond determining whether a person can do the job. It better determines if a person will do a good job, how it will be done, and to what extent. The behavior-based approach to interviewing has an accuracy rating of around 70%. The results include a better match between the employee and the job, lower turnover, and greater job performance and satisfaction for the employee. The behavioral-based interview, BBI, or behavioral description interview, BDI, process also indirectly communicates some of the job expectations and minimizes first-day surprises. This process provides a safe approach to conducting legal interviews because it is based strictly on performance. Candidates also feel the process is fair and equitable. Behavioral questions, which are very good for checking out performance skills, should make up the basis for the BDI interview. However, it's dangerous to concentrate just on behavioral question. We must not forget to check out technical skills too. How do you ask those questions? Generally, we do technical questions early on in the interview. These set the stage for the behavioral questions that come after them. In the long run, you are looking for people who can do the job, technical skills or competencies, will do the job, performance skills or competencies, and that fit. Typically, you will see a 60-40 split amongst interviewees. 40% can do the job, and 60% will do the job. Now it's your turn. Think about it. How would you find out if a person can do the job or has the competence, skills, abilities, and knowledge to do the job? Here, don't believe that 20 years of experience will necessarily give you a competent person. These could have been 20 years of doing the same thing badly. So, remember, experience doesn't equal excellence. Hi there, welcome back. Today, we will talk about asking questions. There are two kinds of questions, open and closed. Closed questions close down an interview. Open questions give us more information, solicit opinions, and generally, open the conversation up to further discussion. For more of our interview with candidates, we will want to focus on open questions. Even if you ask open questions, there is no guarantee you will get all the information you need. Sometimes you have to probe for even more information. So, let's start with probing. There are 5 ways to probe other people. This is sometimes called the probing funnel because we get the most information at the top of the funnel. One of the most common ways of probing is to ask an open question, such as, "Can you describe that more clearly? Would you give me a specific example of what you mean? What do you think we should do?" The difficulty here is that if you ask too many of these, the other person begins to feel like they are under interrogation. A second, very effective way of probing is a pause. Stop talking. Let the other person speak. Let them fill the silence. A third way is to ask a reflective or mirroring question. Let's say the person has just said, "What I really want is more variety in my work." You may respond by just reflecting back to them. Variety? The reflective question usually provides you with an expanded answer without you appearing to ask more questions. Of course, it is best used in conjunction with a pause. Reflective questions or statements focus on clarifying and summarizing without interrupting the flow of the conversation. They indicate your intent to understand the sender's thoughts and feelings. A fourth method that is particularly useful to make certain you are clear about what the individual has said is paraphrasing what has just been said in your own words. For example, "So if I understand you correctly, you can use this response to show that you want to increase the accuracy of your understanding of what has just been said. You may also want to use it to ensure the sender hears what he has just said." Finally, paraphrasing reassures the sender that you are trying to understand what he or she is saying. The last method, most often used as a conversation, is winding down, is the summary question. For example, you have tried ignoring the scent of your colleague's cologne. You have talked with him about how it affects your allergies, and you have tried shutting your door to keep the scent from your workspace. None of these have worked, and now you are asking me to intervene. Have I got it right? Understanding BDI questions. When we begin asking behavioral description questions, these are open questions, but there is a certain pattern to them. The STEM, or main question, seeks information on past situations, the action the candidate took in that situation, and what the outcome was. Additional probing statements give you more information about the situation, reaction, and outcome. Here are sample behavioral description interview questions. Firstly, attitudes and beliefs. Do you consider yourself an enthusiastic person? Tell me about a situation recently where you were really excited and enthusiastic. What were the circumstances? What was it that captured your enthusiasm? What impact did your enthusiasm have on results? How long did your enthusiasm last? Tell me about a situation where you felt it was important for you to take a stand that was openly critical of a boss or coworker. What was the situation? Why was it so important you say something? What reaction did you get? What impact did this have on you? Next is self-motivation. Give me an example of an experience where you felt especially motivated. What was the situation? What did you find so compelling? How long did your motivation last? Have you had this experience at other times? Tell me about a project where you had to work to your limit to get the job done. What was the situation? How long did it last? In what way were you stretched? When did this happen? Stability and persistence. Describe a recent goal or project at work where you experienced tremendous adversity or where the results were elusive. What was your goal? What roadblocks did you encounter? How did you respond? What was the outcome? And finally, maturity and judgment. Describe a difficult decision you have made on a previous job that required you to exercise judgment or discretion. What was the situation? In what way did it require judgment or discretion? How did you go about making your decision? What did you ultimately decide? What did you learn from this experience? The critical incident technique. Sometimes, when we are thinking of fit, the best way we can give someone a glimpse of our company is through a critical incident, also called a situational interview question. This is a bit more complex than the traditional what-if questions we have all asked candidates at one time or another. Critical incidents are stories of real events that describe effective or ineffective job behavior. They are valuable for several reasons. First of all, they are data, not opinions. The data provided in a carefully gathered critical incident depends only on the memory and the observation skills of the person describing the incident. Second, they can be gathered from a number of sources, including supervisors, team colleagues, and customers, to provide a different perspective of the position or of effective performance. Third, critical incidents lead directly to behavior description questions for applicants with related job experience. For applicants without job-related experience, these critical incidents provide the material to create other situations similar to those described in a job-related incident. Situational or critical incident interview questions can also help communicate job expectations. They also rely on goal-setting theory. In simple terms, goal-setting theory suggests that a person's future behaviors are strongly influenced by his or her behavioral intentions or goals. Using this assumption, the purpose of the situational interview questions is to identify job candidates' work-related behavioral intentions by presenting them with a series of incidents which might occur on the job, and for each one asking, "What would you do in this situation?" Clearly, a critical feature of situational interview question is their focus on tapping meaningful samples of behavior. In other words, situational questions will be valid to the extent that they are parallel events which actually occur on the job. The closer they reflect real-life situations, the more likely these questions will predict future job performance. Good critical incidents describe the situation as exactly and objectively as possible. They are not evaluative. They should not reveal the names of the people involved. Here's an example. An example of an effective critical incident for selecting a bookkeeper in a busy manufacturing company. You are trying to do a cost analysis from all the various sections of the plant. People are very busy and don't see the importance of this information, so they aren't cooperating. What would you do? And here is another example. One of your employees has misunderstood your instructions and incorrectly completed a task which you assigned to him. This has caused a severe problem in your section. What would you do? You are currently supervising a group of 5 employees whose productivity is being affected by low morale and a negative attitude of 2 employees. One of these 2 employees is leaving your team in a few months. What will you do to improve the productivity of your team? When you complete the interview, you follow these points. Rate the candidate. Develop a reference check guide. Check the references. Letter of offer. Most of these steps are pretty self-explanatory, but let's take a closer look at rating candidates. Use a matrix. This will help you understand candidates better. It's important to be as objective as possible when rating candidates. Please have a look at this illustration. A simple matrix listing candidates and skills can help. Next, rate candidates against the standard, not each other. It's important not to compare candidates against each other and that the process is as objective as possible. Rate individually, but arrive at consensus. Wait until after all the interviews to discuss your conclusions with the other interviewers. Of course, it's okay to change your rating if you sincerely change your mind, But the point of having several interviewers is to ensure a fair, unbiased process. Next step is orientation. Why have orientation, you might think? Companies spend a lot of time and money recruiting and hiring new employees. Once the hiring decision has been made, many companies feel their job is done. Once the new employee arrives for work, there is very little formal attention paid to reinforce the notion that the employee made the right decision and that they have come to a well-organized, well-run company. The orientation program actually begins during the interview process, as interviewers give the employee some sense of what the organization is like. The orientation continues either planned or unplanned when the employee arrives at work. The employee is making up his or her mind about what type of company this is and whether they will want to begin or continue working here. Remember, most employees arrive for work that first day full of enthusiasm and determined to do a good job. Sure, they are a little bit nervous, but they are confident everything will work out. A poorly planned or non-existent orientation program will cost the organization more money in the long run, and perhaps make the new employee another turnover statistic. And don't forget the importance of providing an orientation for part-time employees. Over the long term, your organization loses if they don't feel you recognize them as a part of the team. Now it's your turn. How did your orientation rate? Think back to your first day on the job with your current company. Please have a look at this slide. Here, read each statement and circle T, true, or F, false, as it relates to the orientation you received. So, how did your orientation rate? Welcome back. Today, let's talk about performance reviews. When they study how employees feel about the performance appraisal process, researchers have found their 4 biggest gripes are: they are not happy if their performance is reviewed or appraised by someone who is not their direct supervisor. They want to be reviewed by somebody who knows their work and what the work consists of. 2. They are not happy if there is no opportunity for them to tell their side of the story. They want two-way communication with their review. 3. Employees are not happy if they get generalities in their discussions. They want specific feedback on their performance and specific suggestions for improvement. 4. Employees are unhappy if they make a commitment to change and there is no follow-up on that commitment. As managers and supervisors, this can give us some food for thought. Remember, the appraisal process starts when the employee and the supervisor reach a mutual understanding of what needs to be accomplished. If expectations are not clearly stated, mutually understood, and presented in measurable terms, performance will be difficult to evaluate. It's a lot easier to make sure employees understand from day one what is expected of them. Let's have a look at this case study. Who will be the best? Who will be the best at performance reviews? Elena and Fletcher are new supervisors attending their first training workshop. They have not covered material on performance reviews yet, but are discussing their personal philosophies about them over lunch. Elena doesn't believe a fair performance review can be made of an employee's work unless assignments have been discussed and expectations agreed upon in advance. She thinks work should be assigned in measurable terms, so both she and the employee can track performance as the work progresses. Fletcher thinks this approach is dangerous. He feels employees should be given only a general idea of what is to be accomplished. He thinks employees who participate in establishing performance objectives will set them too low. He prefers to leave performance expectations vague, to see what the employees accomplish on their own. If their standards don't measure up, he will let them know then and there. Who do you think will be the best at performance reviews? Why? You can respond with your answer in our discussion board. Now that we know a little bit about performance reviews, let's take a look at the actual components of performance reviews. These are key result areas we feel are most important. The principal observable events with which we should deal in a performance appraisal are those relating to the key results areas as determined in the job description. If job descriptions have been properly and thoughtfully written, the key results areas should reflect the reality of employee performance. These are the key results the employee is expected to achieve, and these should be observable results. It is amazing how little attention is paid to key results areas, even though we have said in the job description that these are the results we want from the employee. Observing performance in key results areas is most likely to give us objective evaluations of employee performance. If we can't rely on observable behaviors, we have to resort to subjective evaluations, and when that happens, our own biases and prejudices can get in the way of fair appraisals. Let's take just one example: cooperation. Let's say you were asked to rate it on this scale: excellent, above average, average, fair, or unsatisfactory. What would you check? Is that the same as how I would rate an employee? Maybe, maybe not. Managers want to be fair in their ratings, but in one large organization, they had high raters and low raters. Some people gave all excellence, while others gave a lot of fairs. Their solution to the problem was to hire some additional people to rate the raters. Of course, one may wonder, who rated the raters? Then there is the company where managers gave 98% of their workforce an above average. How can 98% of a company perform better than average? Think about it. What if, in the instance of cooperation, we list the observable performances normally done by the people labeled cooperative and ask whether or not the person does these things: offers help to others, offers to work late, makes suggestions for improvement, follows through on commitment. Let's look at another example. Initiative. Criteria might include: undertakes projects without being asked, writes letter without supervisor reviewing them, calls meetings on their own, orders materials on their own. Here is another situation. Let's say you've hired a truck driver. After a couple of weeks, you ask his or her supervisor how the truck driver is doing, and the supervisor replies, "Just fine. She is very personable and trying hard. She wants to do a good job." Did the supervisor just give an observable or subjective evaluation? We might ask, are we paying the truck driver to be personable, trying hard, and interested in doing a good job? Or is she being paid to submit her route plan daily, deliver 10 loads per day, hand in her report at the end of the day? Sometimes we hear employees saying they shouldn't be evaluated on their performance. They are being paid to think and plan. For example, is it fair to evaluate a policy writer on how many policies they produce? Probably not. But if a given policy writer never had any of his or her policies accepted and implemented, I'm not sure that person should be on the payroll. There must be a way to evaluate employees on the basis of what they accomplish. The cost of absenteeism. Any company's successful operation depends in large part on the attendance of its employees. Unnecessary or unexcused absences affect company operations. Some absences are unavoidable. Others are worth taking steps to control. Absenteeism costs companies more money every year. Can you figure out what absenteeism costs your company in any given month? Can you multiply that by 12 to see what it costs in a year? Remember, this isn't taking into account the cost of replacing the worker, lost productivity, and the impact on morale. Think about it. What are the reasons for an increase in absenteeism in your organization? If absenteeism is a problem in your business, it pays to take some time and discover the cause of the problem. For example, if 25% of all absenteeism is caused by sick children, perhaps your company can subsidize a daycare for employees. The case of Gretchen Washington. Let's look at this case study. Gretchen Washington has been doing routine clerical work in the accounting department of the city of Balderdash for 8 months. Her tardiness record is very poor. She has been late for work on the average of 6 to 8 times a month. Shirley Sims, her supervisor, has talked to her repeatedly. Gretchen always responds by saying she is very sorry and will try to do better. For several days she is on time, and then again she arrives late. She has a variety of unusual excuses that demonstrate a very creative mind. Her work is unusually good and would warrant a sizable merit increase, except for her tardiness. The last time Shirley talked to Gretchen, she warned her that something more drastic would happen if she didn't get to work on time consistently. But just a week later, Gretchen walks in, obviously distressed, about 15 minutes late. Now it's your turn. Think about it. What disciplinary action should Shirley take? How would Shirley approach Gretchen after she puts her coat away? How could this problem have been prevented? Remember, having a policy on absenteeism will not solve a problem with unscheduled absences, but it is an important way to ensure that employees know you are concerned about absences, and it will serve as a clear indication of your expectations. You should clearly outline the policy in your employee handbook. Discuss expectations during the orientation so that employees know about the policy. Indicate you take the policy seriously. Your policy should include specific disciplinary action for failure to properly notify the company of an absence. As an employer, your organization has the right to require that an employee be examined by a doctor to determine whether the employee is able to work. Expect that employees who accept a job are available for work. Expect the employee to take responsibility for making you aware of health conditions that interfere with work. Some additional suggestions. Be consistent. Consider establishing a paid leave bank. Address problem situations immediately. Dealing with diversity. Diversity continues to be a significant issue for many organizations today. While many organizations have come a long way in terms of hiring and promoting diverse people, there is still much work to be done. Many of the more obvious diversity issues have been dealt with, but now we are faced with more subtle challenges, such as stereotypes, hidden attitudes and assumptions, and reverse discrimination. As you can see, the human mind thinks in categories, and we need these categories to help us organize all that we experience as we go through daily life. Without categories, our brains would be filled with a jumble of disconnected facts, impressions, sights, sounds, thoughts, ideas, and sensations. The categories help us make sense of the world we live in and give us a shorthand way to respond to people and events. The categories in our minds contain not just facts and data, they also contain meaning and evaluation. Our categories are not neutral. We usually have feelings about categories. These feelings may be positive or negative. Mention of a category often triggers an instant reaction, almost a reflex. While categories are not a problem in and of themselves, they become a problem when we cannot distinguish between the characteristics of a category and the characteristics of an individual item or individual person within that category. Put another way, the category turns into a stereotype when we can no longer see an individual tree, but only see the forest. When we assume that all trees within a forest are identical, and cannot see that each individual tree has some characteristics in common with the others, that is when our category turns into a stereotype. Diversity in the workplace must be accepted if a firm is to be globally competitive. Today, It would be socially irresponsible and illegal in most jurisdictions to proclaim in an advertising brochure that none but white women and girls are employed, as did Levi Strauss and Company in 1908. Now, however, executives at Levi Strauss appear to be exceptionally committed to diversity management. Not only is the company currently recognized as one of the most ethnically and culturally diverse organizations in the world, but managers at Levi are doing their best to eliminate the glass ceiling, the unwritten and sometimes unconscious reluctance to promote qualified minorities and women into a company's top ranks. The challenge for managers in the coming decades will be to recognize that people with different characteristics often think differently, act differently, learn differently, and communicate differently. Because each culture, each business situation, and each person is unique. There are no simple rules. But experts in managing diversity suggest that both employees and employers need to develop patience, open-mindedness, acceptance, and cultural awareness. Managers must have an acute awareness of characteristics common to a culture, race, gender, age, or sexual preference, while at the same time managing each employee as an individual. Letting staff go. Firing or dismissing an employee is the most severe penalty that management can impose and should therefore be the most carefully considered. The termination experience is traumatic for the employee, leading to feelings of failure, fear, disappointment, and, inevitably, anger. Firing is also difficult for the person who makes the decision. The realization that termination may affect not only the employee, but often an entire family increases the trauma. Not knowing how the terminated employee will react may also create considerable anxiety for the manager who must do the firing. There is a distinct psychology, therefore, that surrounds termination. The fired employee may experience a series of emotions in quick succession, initial shock, even if he or she knew or suspected, anger, the feeling that there must have been a mistake, possible identity collapse, and or ego disintegration. Then wild swings in mood may follow, perhaps culminating in depression. The restoration in self-confidence can take some time. Concurrently, the manager may experience feelings of self-pity, why me, followed by guilt, could I have done better for this person? And compassion, how will the employee survive? There may be a desire to retain the employee, or, conversely, a tendency to blame the employee for doing this to the manager. The manager must prepare for the termination interview in order to remain in complete control. The termination interview should always be conducted before a witness and in an environment where the manager has a psychological advantage. For example, the company boardroom. Some managers avoid using their offices for this purpose, as they do not want employees to associate routine calls to the office with the possibility of dismissal. The environment should be calm, formal, polite, and unemotional. No matter what the fired employee says or does, the manager must keep control over his or her emotions. The employee should be told of the decision and the documented reasons. An official letter of termination should be ready. It should be made clear that the decision is final. There should be no debate. Remember, whether an employee resigns, is terminated, or is laid off, there should always be an exit interview. The exit interview gives your company the opportunity to learn from past factors that resulted in the loss of an employee. An exit interview can be as simple as a questionnaire that an employee fills out, Or it can be a formal interview. Sometimes, if an employee has been terminated, it may be useful to give them the questionnaire to take home, and then set up a follow-up interview a week later. This gives them time to cool off and think about their reaction. Regardless of the method you choose, let the employee know that their feedback is valuable and will be considered, if not acted upon. Take a look at the sample questionnaire in our resources file.